afternoon worldwide. Today I'm going to talk about things you shouldn't do while fasting. I felt like I need to tell this to people because a lot of people fast in the wrong way and then their prayers end up not being answered because the things you were doing, it's actually not making your fasting effective. That's why it's important to know how to fast, because in the Bible it's written different types of fasting and how you should act when you're fasting, because fasting is basically connecting with God. How you should act, how you should look is very important. When you're fasting, you shouldn't look like you are starving yourself. There's a Bible verse in the Bible that says you should look presentable. Put oil on your face. You don't look dry. You don't look like you're starving or anything like that, because it's a way of connecting with God. It's not a suffering moment for you. It's a moment for you to connect with God. So you should commit yourself to fasting and not actually look like you're just doing this so it just passes by. You're just doing just because you just want something from God. He's gonna know. You can read your mind, you can read your heart, so you already know. That's why sometimes a lot of people fast the wrong way and then the prayers are not answered. Basically, God is saying whatever you're doing is not considered as fasting because you are busy doing this and that and that and this. So I'm going to tell you how to fast according to the Bible. I'm going to tell you the things you shouldn't do when you're fasting according to the Bible. The first thing we're always going to do is open our Bibles. So we're going to go to the book of Matthew chapter 6 verse 16 to 18. It says, Jesus commanded his followers to fast. He said, when you fast and not if you fast. This shows that fasting is not an option but a commandment. It's more like Jesus expects fasting to be a regular part of your life, like spiritual life, to grow our faith and get closer to God. Like fasting basically makes you more holy. And then so that's why Jesus wants us to always fast and have a stronger relationship with God and bond with God. So I'm going to tell you some of the things you shouldn't do while you're fasting to make sure our fast is truly pleasing to God. Because as we all know, fasting brings us closer to God. The very first mistake that literally everyone makes mistakes of is when you're fasting to impress others. That is not acceptable to God. When you're fasting and you're telling the whole world, oh, I'm fasting for these days. Oh, I fasted long enough. Oh, I fasted more days than you. Fasting to impress others, you literally post about it. You're literally boasting about it. And it shouldn't be like that. It's not pleasing to God. He's not going to answer your prayers through fasting if you fast like that. Because fasting is a private matter between you and God and nobody else. Nobody else should know that you're fasting. You shouldn't even look like you're fasting. It's a private matter between you and God. There's literally no need to brag about it or draw attention to yourself. So unnecessary. Because in the Bible, Jesus warns us that when we're fasting, we shouldn't look like we're fasting. We shouldn't appear like we're fasting and making our face looking disfigured just to impress others. God answers fasting prayers that are done secretly. That's one thing you need to understand, okay? Because you need to understand that God rewards fasting done secretly between Him and us. You shouldn't fast to impress people. You're wasting your time. You're basically wasting your time. If you're fasting and you tell everybody, hey, I'm fasting, I can't touch that. Hey, I'm fasting, I can't eat that. Hey, I'm fasting for this and that. God is not going to answer your prayers if you do that. Okay? You need to change, honey. You need to change. You just need to understand that things does not work that way. Things does not work your way. It works God's way. There's no need for you to be doing the things your own way. You're wasting your time. Come on. It's either God's way or no other way. Because throughout the years in this generation, I've come across people, they want to look very spiritual, but they don't fast to get closer to God. God is just not going to answer to those kind of people, because you just want to impress the world. You want to impress other people by looking very spiritual and fasting. Fasting is not an announcement. It's a secret thing you do between you and God. Nobody else should come in between or the whole world knowing, which doesn't make sense at all. So please, please, please don't fast to impress others. Don't fast to show off. God is not going to answer those prayers. I'm sorry, but you're wasting your time. Rather go eat. Number two is making bad decisions while fasting. Because a lot of people tend to think that they've been fasting, now they can hear God's voice. Because when you've been fasting for a certain period of time and you've been fasting for an extended time, you're going to think that you're hearing God when it's actually yourself. It's in the Bible is written, not lean on your own understanding, right? So a lot of people make bad decisions because they think they can hear God just because they fasted. No, sweetheart, it doesn't work like that. You need to know when God's talking and you need to know when you are talking. Because in your mind, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can hear God. Oh my gosh, I should make this decision because I've been fasting. Oh no, honey. Oh no. You should know when God's talking and you should know when you are talking to yourself in your head, because your mind can deceive you. You may be thinking you're making good decisions from God when in reality you are just irritated, impatient, and hungry. You gotta be careful when you're making decisions. It's not God telling you, it's you just telling God what you want to hear, basically. Go back to our Bible again. In the book of Matthew 4 says, Satan tried to tempt Jesus to make important decisions while physically weak from fasting. That's you. You are weak from fasting, so you want to make decisions. You want to tell your mind things you want to hear, thinking it's God telling you while you're fasting, when in reality you're just hungry and impatient. So let's carry on in the Bible. In the Bible it says, out of a clear mindset, Jesus refused. Likewise, we should be cautious about claiming to hear God's voice on major life choices when fasting has left us physically weak or emotionally vulnerable. We should be careful when we are so weak from fasting because we are so emotionally vulnerable. We think that God is talking to us when in reality it's just your mind playing with your head, when it's the devil tempting you by putting things in your mind, which is not good. You understand? So seek God humbly for his direction. So the thing you must do, you must seek God humbly for his direction, but wait to actually make decisions when your mind is clear and stable. You should wait. You should wait. When your body feels okay, your mind is at one place, you should wait. Don't make decisions after when you are fasting, thinking you are hearing God, but in reality you're actually not. So yeah. Because when you're fasting, you're very sensitive and you can literally be tempted to act out of character. So you should be very careful how you act when you're fasting, for your fast to become effective, for your fast to become truly and genuine to God, for God to answer your prayers. Because obviously, when people are hungry, they make harsh decisions because your body is fighting against your spirit because it's hungry. It needs to be fed. A lot of people tend to make bad decisions when they're fasting. Have you seen when someone is really hungry, they're so agitated and irritated and so annoyed? Have you seen? I'm sure you have seen it. I'm sure you have felt it yourself. In the book of Isaiah 58 warns us that true fasting involves living justly with others. You should act out of love amongst others. So be mindful of your attitude during fasting. You gotta be at peace with love and kindness towards others. Don't act harshly. Don't fight others when you're fasting. Staying silent or isolated can help avoid unnecessary fights, So you read the book of Isaiah, it tells you how you should act when you're fasting. Ask God to help you to remain loving towards others, despite the hunger and the discomfort, So you should be careful. You should be careful how you act when you're fasting. Read the book of Isaiah 58. It tells you everything that you need to know. Mistake number 3 that people make is fasting on hunger strike to pressure God. You need to know that you can never pressure God. Come on. You can't pressure the Most High. You can never pressure God to do something for you because you are viewing hunger strike as a potential thing to force God's hand to help you. It doesn't work like that. You see, one thing you can never do as a believer is to put God under pressure. You need to know that you can never pressure God. Honestly, you can never pressure God. You literally cannot force him to do what he doesn't want to do. He's in control of everything. You can't tell him to do this and that. No. It doesn't matter if you've been fasting for years, for months, for days, because one thing you can never do is put God under pressure outside of his will. That's one thing you can never do. God will never come under pressure because of you. He's in control of everything. He decides what he wants to do, what's best for you. It's God's will, not your will. Know the difference. So let's open our Bibles again. In the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 12, verse 16 to 23, the Bible says David pleaded with God for his child he fasted for and went into his house and spent the nights lying on the ground. But God did not listen to him. You can fast for days, for months, for years. If God does not want to do what you want, you will not do it. That's one thing you need to know. You can never put God under pressure. Imagine you want to put a God who's in control under pressure to make him answer your prayers. He's just going to end up humbling you to know who you are talking to. You know, he's not just a random God. No, he's the Most High, darling. He's the Most High. And then in the Bible, days later, David realized that the child had died. You cannot pressure God to do something that you want. To be continued in the Bible, then David got up from the ground. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house and his requests. They served him food and he ate. Do you notice that even David fasted for God to keep his child alive, but God did not change his mind? You need to understand that you can never make God change his mind about a certain prayer or a certain blessing that you want in your life. Like I said before, it's either God's way or no other way. God's way or no other way. You can never make God change his mind. He knows what's best for you. He's going to decide what he's going to do in your life. It's God's will. You need to remember it's God's will and not your will. And if you live by that sentence that I just told you, you're going to be the happiest person in your life because you know God is in control and you are not in control. You need to remember that you shouldn't fast to pressure God because this treats God as though he's reluctant to bless us, which is not the case. So we have to approach God with devotion and praise, not with pressure. Because obviously God is not looking for loopholes to not bless us. It's us that's making the mistakes of pressuring him, thinking we're going to make him to do what we want, which is the wrong way of fasting. Because we have people who fast to pressure God to bless them. And then when their prayers are not answered, they're going to think, oh, God doesn't want to bless us. Oh, God, this and that. No. One thing you need to understand is that you never tell God what to do. You can never tell God how to move. He tells you how to move, not us telling him how to move. And once again, it's his will and not our will. Okay? Is that going through your medulla oblongata? Approaching fasting as a tool to twist God's arm will only lead to frustration because you're going to think, oh, he's not answering our prayers. I've been praying for years. I've been praying for months, for days, and still no prayer has been answered. Honey, you need to know that. Okay, open your ears. You need to know that it's God's will and not your will. You need to know that He's not going to do things your way. But obviously, in the Bible, it says, seek and you shall receive. But it depends on what you are seeking for. It depends on what you want. God obviously is going to look into it like, is this what you're asking for good for you or not? And if it's not, he's gonna say, no, I'm not gonna give that to you. I'm gonna give you something bigger, something more wonderful than what you want. That's how God is, you know. He does things to make our lives better. He does things out of love. He does things to beautify our lives. So don't misunderstand God. Just because a certain prayer of yours is not answered, there's a reason why it's not answered. It's either you made a mistake while fasting or it's not good for you. Or it's not God's will for what you're fasting for. It's important that we understand God. And obviously, understanding God is beyond human imagination. That's why we seek and we know Him and have a relationship with Him. In order to know somebody, you need to have a relationship with Him, right? So know God. Seek God. and He'll give you the wisdom that you need. He'll give you bigger things than what you were praying for. As long as you have your faith, as long as you are obedient, as long as you believe that you receive it. Faith is very important, guys. Keep your faith up there. Keep your obedience. Faith and obedience, those two, darling, you'll be blessed. Another mistake that people do when fasting is when they become irritated and argumentative. You need to understand, you need to be holy when you're fasting. You cannot be arguing with someone else or your wife or your husband and you're fasting at the same time. That's literally a trap when fasting. You need to act out of love. You need to be holy. You need to be kind to others when you're fasting because you're literally this close with God. So basically, when you're fasting, this is you and this is God. This is what fasting does. It brings you closer to God. So when you start arguing or fighting with somebody, God is slowly going to distance himself from your presence because you're busy what? You're busy arguing with somebody, which is something God cannot tolerate. You need to understand that you need to be holy when you're around God. A hungry man becomes an angry man. Sounds familiar? You should control your anger and your hunger when you're fasting. You should not become angry or irritated when you're fasting. Don't get angry at temporary things because obviously the devil is going to tempt you to get angry or to sin when you're fasting because he knows that fasting brings you closer to God and he just want to separate you from God. And then you're going to fall for it because the devil can tempt you through other people. He can literally bring someone who's looking for a fight to fight with you. And the best thing you can do is act out of love and avoid that fight. It's just temptation for you to separate yourself from God. Because I have seen other people who fast and the temper goes very high. Like I said, a hungry man is an angry man. When you're hungry, you shouldn't become irritated, which is literally not good. Anger is a sin. Being irritated and act out of bitterness, and when you're hungry you're gonna feel like you want to pick up fights just because your body is agitated because of hunger. You shouldn't be like that. Yes, I'm not only telling this to you guys, I'm also telling this to myself because I've made such mistake. The mistake that people make is when says obsessing over what time they're gonna eat again by constantly looking at the clock time to see what time you break your fast. It's like you're trying to break out of jail. It's like you're trying to break down a door by looking at the clock the whole time just so you can break your fasting. It doesn't work like that, guys. It's not going to be considered as fasting. It's because you're certainly just looking at the clock and not thinking about something else and not thinking about God. Because when people are fasting, they tend to look at the clock the whole time to see what time they are breaking. This literally messes up your whole purpose of fasting. You're not fasting. You're just hungering yourself so you can break your fast. You shouldn't even think about time. All you need to do is think about God because you're fasting for God, for you to get closer to God. So do that for a purpose. Do that for a purpose, not to just the whole time you're not praying. Okay, let's say you're fasting, right? You spend the whole day not praying. You just spend the whole day doing your own things, not getting in the word, not talking to God. Then what are you fasting for? I thought you're fasting to get closer to God, but you're not doing anything that involves God. You're just looking at the time to see when you're going to break your fasting. This whole thing is going to mess up your whole purpose of fasting. You should not do that. God knows our heart. He's going to know if you're genuinely doing the fast to get closer to Him or not. God is watching you. God knows your heart, your mind, your soul, everything. You can never hide anything from God. That's the best part. You can never hide anything from God. So when you're fasting, be genuine. Show love to God because He's watching you. His whole eyes is on you. Do the right thing. Fasting is about humbling yourself and refocusing completely on God. Not on worldly things, not on yourself, on God. Read the Word. Watch some sermons. Study the Bible. Do something for the Lord. Serve the Lord. Show him that you are genuinely fasting to have a relationship and to connect with him, to have a bond with him. Don't fast just because you think it's a must to fast to break throughs or to be delivered. You're wasting your time when you do that. You need to understand certain things does not work certain ways. This is quite obvious because you're just fasting just to get something out of God. No. Stay busy with prayer, reading scriptures, and other spiritual disciplines. You will see God's hand moving if you do that. I promise you. You're going to get times when the enemy tempts you to only think about food. Take those thoughts captive to Christ and not think about food. Take it to Jesus. He will help you. He's there for a reason. He helped us. He died for us. He's there to help us because it's not easy to do it by ourselves. Go to God when you're struggling, not go to God when you're perfect. You know that you can never be perfect, right? You need to recognize what's happening in your mind and refocus and take that problem to God and refocus on God and His presence. Don't leave any door open for the devil to come and tempt you. When you see that you're being tempted, close that door. If you see your hand is tempting you to sin, cut that arm off. Spiritually cut that arm off. And most importantly, when you mess up, don't use it as an excuse to abandon your fasting completely. If you make a mistake, it's okay, pray about it, ask for forgiveness. But don't quit on God. Don't quit fasting. Continue your fasting. If you feel like you made a mistake, try again tomorrow. God gives us a million, zillion, trillion chances every day. Abstain from food and start connecting with God and start fasting. This is also a way your body detoxifies itself, which is good. Start eating health. Another very important mistake that people make is fasting in an unbiblical way. Because Isaiah 58 warns us against fasting God never called us for. So while fasting from food, avoid unbiblical extremes like flogging yourself or other harmful acts to try to prove your devotion to God. You need to realize that when you're fasting, refrain from unbiblical things like non-Christian religious things, which is not of God, don't do ungodly things when you're fasting. You need to know you cannot be doing a crime out there when you're fasting and you know that it's wrong and you know that God is not happy about it. So you need to understand you cannot be doing such certain things when you're fasting. So when you are fasting, stick to biblical fasting, stick to your prayers and spiritual discipline, and stick to biblical regulations, not man-made regulations, okay? And then another important thing that people do is fasting while ignoring your health and your other special needs. We need to understand that our body is the temple of the Lord, so we should take care of our bodies. We should rest well when we're fasting. We should drink water well. We should eat healthy food like God's food, like not sugar and stuff like that. Care for your body even when you're fasting. Sleep well. Drink water, exercise, be productive. Do the right things to your body. Treat your body well. God gave you a body so you can take care of it, not so you can abuse it and then end up in a hospital. Don't do that. Eat things that God wants you to eat. Eat the food that God created, like fruits, vegetables. These days it's hard to tell which is meat or which is not meat. So I'd rather also, in my opinion, I would refrain from eating meat because, especially pork, don't eat pork. Pork is not a clean animal. I don't think God would suggest for us to eat. Yeah, I almost forgot. Be hygienic when you're fasting. It's not fair that you're fasting and you're not showering. How does that work? It doesn't work. Clean yourself. Look clean. Like I said, look clean for the Lord. You got to take care of your body. Personal hygiene is important. Go shower. It takes only a few minutes, okay? Okay, darling. And then the last one that we all probably make a mistake of is failing to break your fast. Oh gosh, I think I've done that so many times. Yeah. Because after fasting, it's literally so tempting and so easily to eat a lot of food. Don't eat lots of food while you break your fast. No. Eat healthy, because after a certain period of time of you not eating while fasting, your intestines need to feel at ease. You need to eat something that's gonna make food digestible. So eat soft food. Don't go straight up and eat sugar. No, it's not healthy, because on an empty stomach you shouldn't eat sugar straight up, because your body needs to digest proper food, which is healthy food. I rather prefer you eat salty food, like salt dinner food, and not eat sugar, because you on an empty stomach you don't want the fluid that's in your stomach to burn the sugar, which is not good. It's just gonna release a whole toxic substance in your body. So you should know what to eat after you're breaking your fast, and you shouldn't eat a lot when you break your fast. You should eat a certain amount of food and not just gouge everything. It's easy. I know it's easy to gouge everything because you are so hungry, but you have to take it slowly and avoid an inrush of food. Like I said, you should avoid eating sweets and heavy foods so that your body adjusts, and that you should drink lots, like plenty of water. In conclusion, the whole purpose of fasting biblically involves humbling ourselves, praying, and focusing our hearts on God, which is very important. So you should be very careful of what you do when you're fasting, because it can literally make your fast go to waste if you do certain things. So you need to practice fasting biblically and not do things your own way, because in the end of the day, if you do things your own way, your fast is not going to end up being effective, or it's not going to end up having a purpose. And you need to understand that fasting holds a great power to draw us closer to God. So you need to do this with all your heart, genuinely, out of love and kindness for everything that's around you and everybody, so that God sees that you are truly, truly trying to be holy for Him, and He just pulls Himself closer to you. So we should approach it carefully and biblically to honor Him and avoid potential pitfalls. So that's how I wanted to tell you guys, because I think this makes sense, right? It's very important what you do when you're fasting. So that is it for today, guys, and I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you in another video. Bye.